There's an incredible investigative report out from Dave Jameson of the Huffington Post about how mine workers are pretty much just as fucked as they've ever been. So I don't know about you guys, but whenever I think of a mine worker, I think of the hard hats, the helmets, the goggles, and they got like the black soot all over them from working in the mine. And usually you associate it with, like, when I think of mining, I think of like Chile, right? Remember the Chilean miners? They had that thing that went on there recently in Turkey, the same thing. So you don't really think of like the most modern nations, although those nations are certainly, they're not like third world, they're not terrible places. But I don't associate that with the United States of America. But it turns out we actually do quite a bit of mining over here, and it is horribly regulated. The regulations themselves aren't adequate, and even the inadequate regulations are seldom enforced. And now there are a few whistleblowers that were brave enough to stand up and say something about the conditions of the mines, specifically in Kentucky. And man, it's absolutely staggering. So there's a limit to the amount of dirty dust and particulate matter that's allowed in the air while these miners are working. And of course, if you go above that, it can lead to some really, really serious long-term health problems. It cuts off your life short, and you get that infamous disease, which we know from, early 1900s and late 1800s in the U.S., called black lung. That's like the go-to example that people use when they talk about an unregulated marketplace. They go, oh, yeah, people living in tenement houses and working in factories, no labor laws, getting black lung. Like, that's the perfect example of what happens in an unregulated marketplace. Well, so again, they have limits that say you can't go above this level, and they measure it with a machine called a dust pump. Now, that's some older technology. As I'll get to in a second, we do something somewhat new now where we're putting into place some new regulations. Well, what happens when they use the dust pump? Well, the problem is it's reported solely from the mining company themselves. So they do their own test, and then they tell the regulators, oh, yeah, our levels are X amount. And then the regulators go, oh, okay, so you're well within the levels, and you're doing a good job, keep going. Now, again, that's totally inefficient, and you can't trust those numbers because, of course, the company has a reason to lie and always say that they're doing the right thing and they're well within the regulations. I mean, that's like a libertarian's paradise when they say, no external forces, no independent body checking us. We're just going to tell you when we fuck up and when we don't. And shock, they say they never fuck up. So because there's nobody looking over their shoulder, get this, what they end up doing is, quote, placing the pumps near clean air intakes, sticking them in lunch boxes away from the dust, and wearing them only a fraction of the time that they're supposed to be worn. So they describe that I think it's a process that takes hours for it to measure the levels, and what they do is they keep it in the mine for a certain period of time, like 30 minutes or so, and then they move it. So when the levels come out, it looks like it's well within it, but it's not well within it because you didn't fucking keep it in the mine the entire time. So they drastically underreport the levels. Well, what's happening now in large numbers in Kentucky in these mines? People are getting black lung. The old school disease that we mock because it's linked with poor regulation and an inferior marketplace, it's back. It's back. In fact, one of the guys who is a whistleblower, I don't have his name in front of me now, but he mentioned he's 29 years old. And he says, look, man, here's the problem. The problem is that Kentucky has like a 10% unemployment rate. It's above the national average. Everybody's looking for a job. There's not many jobs out there. The average or the median income in Kentucky, I forget which one, is about $39,000. If you're a miner, it pays about $50,000. So everybody's scrambling to get those jobs. And then when you get in there, you feel like if you say something about the conditions, you're immediately going to be fired. It wouldn't only affect you, but it would also, you don't want it to affect your buddies either. So there could be work stoppages, and you feel like they might turn on you. And of course, there's a culture of camaraderie, and you don't want to turn on your buddies. So it's like there's silence across the board of all these people working in these terrible conditions. And what happens as a result of it? The 29-year-old kid was like, I already have the first stages of black lung. He has a small farm. He works on his farm on the weekends, and he's like, I can't work. Like, I go, I work a couple minutes or an hour, and I'm already breathing heavy, shortness of breath, coughing. And they say that's the first. He went to the doctor. They said that's the first stages of black lung. Like, you're already done. There's another guy. He's older than this 29-year-old guy. He has full out black lung, and he was explaining that, look, I was one of the guys who helped them with covering it up. I was the guy who would take the measuring tools and move it from inside the mine to outside to help them out, and they would give me extra pay to try to silence me, and then now I realize everything that I did was wrong, and now, he's in a legal battle with them for multiple reasons. They cut his hours when they realize he talked to the press. It's this giant battle that's going on right now, but it's an amazing thing to see, man. Again, I go back to one of the things I said earlier on in the show, that we naively think like, back in the early 1900s and late 1800s, unregulated, crazy place. We're smarter than that now. We're above that now. And to a certain extent, that was true briefly, like when FDR came into power and he was fighting back against the Great Depression, and he did some New Deal legislation, and, he was in favor of unionization and labor laws and all that stuff and environmental laws. And there was a brief period of time where that was in place, but it was chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And it was fully gone by the time Ronald Reagan came into power, and he went ham. And then they also say in the article that around 1970 or so, when we were starting to ramp up mining in the U.S., there weren't cases of black lung because you didn't have to go deep into the mine yet. The longer you do it, then the deeper you have to go into the mine. The deeper you go into the mine, the more enclosed a place it is, and the more particulate matter there is in the air because you're not out in the open. So now, so many people are getting black lung. The new regulations they put into place, what they did is they lowered the limit of particulate matter that could be in the air, which leads to the black lung, which is clearly a good thing. But even that, they negotiated. They negotiated with the mining lobbyists. And, they wanted a lower level, and then the lobbyists wanted a higher level, and they met in the middle. Like it's something you could do. Like, your body will negotiate with the black lung also. No, that doesn't happen. Just put the fucking safe level and that's it. Well, so they slightly made the levels better, and they have new equipment that can monitor it, that it doesn't take an extended period of time to be in the area and have it there, so it's harder to cheat this way. But it's still largely self-regulated. OSHA is one of the regulatory bodies that's responsible for it, and even they're admitting, like, we're not funded enough to really take care of this, and we have so many places we have to check that we can't just focus on this. And there's another offshoot of OSHA, MSHA, probably Mining Safety Health Administration. They're saying the same thing, like, we can't really guarantee anything here. And it's in the year 2014, not only do people have black lung again, but they're also resigning ourselves to that fact. We put some symbolic regulations in the book and say, this is how it should be, but they're still self-regulating. And the problem is going to continue. It's not going to get better unless we actually find a way to crack down on the places that mess up, and we incentivize the miners to step forward and be whistleblowers. And we really find a way to do this the right way, fully fund the regulatory bodies, make sure that the penalties are steep and severe if you do violate this, because people's lives are in question here. You're basically saying, here, we'll hire you, give you $50,000 a year, and you'll die young. And you'll have a terrible end-of-life experience. I mean, the details of people who have black lung at the end of their life, shortness of breath, coughing all the time, coughing up mucousy black goo, like just disgusting and terrible, no quality of life at all. So you're telling people to make a deal with the devil, and they're doing it because they have no other way of making money. We got to regulate these places better. This is what the government is for. The whole purpose of the government is to stop the abuses of private industry like this.